Today it's all about Falernum, everyone's favorite spice liqueur, or is it a syrup? Maybe it's both. We're going to sample 5 different Falernums on their own and in a cocktail. 2 of these are homemade, one is a syrup with no alcohol, and the other 2 are liqueurs with some alcohol that you can pick up at the store. Now, we don't know too much about the full history of Falernum, but we know it was a staple of Barbados at least as far back as the early 1800s and most definitely the 1700s. No one has really cracked the code to find the oldest or original recipes, but that's probably because it was homemade. A combination of rum, lime, sugar, and sometimes spices that was open to interpretation for whoever was making it. It's only briefly covered in the Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails, where Martin Cate mentions that in the early 1900s, rum traders in Barbados were bottling their own Falernum, and it would appear that the only one of these Falernums that still exists today is John D. Taylor's Velvet Falernum. Darcy O'Neill from MakeAndDrink shared a recipe from 1896 that he found in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And just a note on researching, it is so much easier nowadays for someone like me to research than it would have been probably just 5 years ago, but definitely 10 years ago, because I don't have to go to a local library or a university or a big city library to find old newspaper articles. Pretty much everything is at my fingertips. So I just want to point that out, because if you were trying to find some of this information 5 or 10 years ago, it would be a lot more challenging than if it was now. And Falernum is this thing that I was hoping I could find out more information on, and I can't. There's just not a lot out there. Now, when it comes to this recipe that Darcy O'Neill picked up from the Philadelphia Inquirer, is that it was syndicated. It shows up across the United States, and it described Falernum as a delightful concoction which the West Indian, mindful of his health, takes in sips and swallows at least once a day, and that about an hour before his dinner. An appetizer, he calls it. 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak. In 1827, there's a listing in the Hartford Courant with molasses and a shrub that they called Falernum. Even earlier than that, in 1804, and then in 1808, we can see Falernum in advertisements from the Barbados Mercury. And that pretty much proves the point here that it was definitely around before then, because we're talking about commercially known and available products to buy as far back as at least 1804, which means that those homemade versions were definitely happening in the decades probably before that. And that's kind of all we really know. There are recipes with almond and clove and ginger with overproof rums, but what we truly know is that it's open for interpretation. And it looks like it should include rum, lime, and sugar, but then you'll find syrups as well, which are also called out in a lot of recipes nowadays. Now, in front of me are 5 of these Falernums, and we're going to taste each one of them, and I'm going to show you how to make 2 of them. John D. Taylor's Velvet Falernum is a bar staple, the most widely available Falernum. It's made in Barbados by R.L. Seal. It's just 11% ABV and is the most mild out of all the Falernums today. Calfornia Falernum is new to me, and it's from Petaluma, California. I've not even tried this yet. Claims to be funky Jamaican-style rum with lime and allspice notes. It's 30% ABV. The only true syrup we're trying today is from Liquid Alchemist. You may have come across other brands like B.G. Reynolds, which are also good. This is a newer product from them, and I've only just recently tasted it. It's delicious. They did send me this bottle for free several months ago. It's non-alcoholic. It contains almond, ginger, vanilla, and other natural flavors. Now, Paul Clark's Falernum No. 9 is probably the most popular homemade version and is called out in the Beach Bum Berry books. The recipe is all over the internet, and the one you see before you is actually not Paul Clark's Falernum No. 9. It's my reinterpretation of Falernum No. 9, just adapting it to make it faster and easier for how I make syrups. But I'm not saying that it's better. It's just kind of taking the same principles as before and reinterpreting it. I also made it to match the sweetness and the sugar content and also the ABV of the original Falernum No. 9. And the granddaddy of all homemade versions is the newest version of the homemade version, which is the Tropical Standard recipe. And for this one, you're going to need a lot of ingredients, but I will tell you that it is worth it. So before we try them, I'm going to show you how to make both of these syrups, starting with my own reinterpretation of Falernum No. 9. This episode has chapters below if you want to skip ahead to the tastings. Let's start with some clove, about 15 cloves or 1.3 grams. Then I'm adding 1 tablespoon or 13 grams of slivered almonds, 1 ginger juice ice cube. It's half ginger juice and half water. I did a whole video on how I make ginger syrup and I freeze them into ice cubes like this, but you could use fresh ginger or a ginger juice instead. Now we have 2 options for the spirit here. You can add in 3 ounces of an overproof Jamaican plus 1 3/4 ounces of water, or what I did was something a little more neutral, and I used 4 3/4 ounces of a 40% ABV rum, and then I'll still need a half an ounce of water later. Now this will equal the same as using Wray & Nephew. The ABV matches when it's all said and done. Now I'm adding lime peel, trying to avoid the pith, but a little bit is okay here. And lastly, I'm going to add in that half an ounce of water. This is just to closely approximate the original recipe's ABV. Now we're going to add in 7 ounces of a 2-to-1 simple syrup, followed by a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract, then 2.6 grams of a citric acid and 1.3 grams of a malic acid. And this is since we're not using any fresh juice in this. And that's it. This just takes a few minutes and it's my version of Falernum number 9. Now for the granddaddy of all homemade Falernums. I filmed this about 6 months ago and I wish I could find the spice grinder. I can't find it anywhere. We're going to start with 0.75 grams of star anise or star anise, 0.75 grams of mace. Then we're going to need some nutmeg, and I obviously always keep one of these in my pocket. If you know, you know. And we're going to need 1 gram of this. Then 1.5 grams of clove. And then I'm going to grind them all together to make our spice mixture. Now in a blender container, I'm going to add in 13 grams of lime peel and then 25 grams of thinly sliced ginger, 30 milliliters of a 151 proof rum, 125 milliliters of Wray & Nephew or another overproof Jamaican rum. And it looks like I forgot to hit record when I blended this, but you get it. In a zip top bag, I'm going to add the spice mixture, followed by the contents of the blender. Then we're going to let this hang out in the refrigerator for 24 hours. After 24 hours, we'll strain it. 15 milliliters of lemon juice, 15 milliliters of lime juice, and then add in 0.6 milliliters of almond extract, 265 milliliters of a rich 2-to-1 cane syrup. And if you want to know how to make that, I'll leave a link in this video's description. Now we stir this, and here's where we need to check the volume, not the weight, but the actual volume. Whatever that volume is, we're going to add an equal amount of a 1-to-1 50 bricks gum syrup. And I'll leave a recipe for that in this episode's description. So there you go, the Tropical Standard Falernum. Let's try through them, and let's start with my homemade version of Falernum number 9. It's very sweet, almondy, clove, a little bit of lime. Tastes like the foundation of a good Falernum. It is going to be more bitter because I took the lime peels and I blended them. If you want to lower that bitterness, you could do that by reducing the amount of lime peel. And then you could also just use lime zest if you want to try to avoid the pith altogether. But the thing about this one that I can't give you an answer on is how long it lasts. It's the same as Falernum number 9, except we have more lime in there and we're not filtering it all out. Even though I put it through a filter, it's not filtering everything out, and this will separate in the refrigerator. So I don't want to give you a solid answer as to how long that should last because I've only kind of tested a couple batches and this is the one I landed on and have kept now for about a month. But it's mainly if you're trying to get something done in a hurry and you don't want to go to all the trouble to make some of these other ones or Falernum number 9, you can make this in just a few minutes. Let's move on to Velvet Falernum, the kind of original one that everyone kind of knows about. There's like a musty fragrance coming off of it. It's not quite any of the typical aromas like clove or lime, ginger. Very sweet, almost cloyingly sweet, and mainly lime. Just a little bit of lime. And John D. Taylor's gets kind of a bad rap because of its lack of intensity compared to other Falernums. But when you're looking at a recipe, the problem you're going to have is that these are not going to match. You can't sub in these two for each other in a recipe and get the same drink. So that's why I often default to the John D. Taylor's, because it is the one that's called for the most, and it's the most benign. It's not going to impact your cocktail as much as the other ones. It's relatively one-dimensional. It's a syrup for the most part, even though it is 11% ABV. And even though it's got such a small ABV, because the flavors are so muted, you can actually taste the ethanol in this. On to the Tropical Standard. Right away, it's clove, but you can get other of those warm baking spice notes as well. It's not just clove. I made this a long time ago, like over 6 months. I think the book says it'll keep for 6 months. I keep it in the fridge. I do think that this will last you longer than 6 months. I made it so long ago, I don't remember exactly the spices in there, but I do know I used mace, which is a new spice here on the channel. I haven't made anything with mace before, and it's very pleasant. It's not too much of any one spice. It's very thick. It's very intense. It's warming. It has a finish of clove, and the combination of the other spices in there mellow out the clove. If you're replacing John D. Taylor's with the Tropical Standard one, you're going to have a completely different cocktail. But this is now, I've had this several times, just tasting it. I put it in some cocktails. It's great. It is so intense, with so many intense flavors, yet it's not something like allspice dram, where it's kind of difficult to drink allspice dram on its own. It has a pleasantness to it, like a warming, pleasant baking spice note with the clove coming through that a lot of tiki and tropical cocktails want and need, are those bold flavors, and it has the boldest flavor in this one. Moving on to the Calfornia Falernum. The aroma is light and sweet and hints of vanilla. It's much different than the aroma from the Falernum number 9 version and the Tropical Standard. It's pretty thin, not a lot of color to it either. You can definitely taste the proof on it. You can get the fact that it's not a syrup. It has it's more spirit-like than the other ones so far. Knowing that it is either has or going for a funky Jamaican rum characteristic, I don't know if I would have picked that up on my own had I not known that. But there is something that is uniquely different about it. On its own, I don't really enjoy it as much. And if you're thinking about the old school Falernums of having as an appetizer before dinner, cracking some ice into a glass and pouring yourself a little bit of Falernum, that so far is not as pleasant as the others, but we got to put it in a cocktail. We'll find out when we do that. Let's move on now to the final one, which is a syrup, which is the Liquid Alchemist. Strong aroma of clove and allspice, and I think maybe out of all of these, this one has the most intense spice aroma. It is delicious. It is very, very, very good. It's I guess I would say it feels less like the lime and almond based Falernums and more of like a spiced syrup, a spiced cordial syrup. And it's even spicier, I think, than the Tropical Standard version. And on the scale of, if you're going for like just hints of lime and very little spice, it's the opposite of the John D. Taylor's. There's something about it which I think is, as you move into the fall and the winter, it's going to work so well in cocktails that you want to bring in lots of big, warm baking spice flavors. But yes, the Liquid Alchemist syrup, it's delicious. When I first tried it, I felt that way right away. So out of all of these, it's the only syrup here, so the only one without alcohol. You're going to have to make your own decision about, is this better than some of the other syrups on the market? But you like those big, intense spice notes, then this is the one out of this batch. The Falernum number 9 has the most lime, and the Tropical Standard one's kind of in the middle there, and most well-rounded, most complex with the most flavors going on. But let's put them in a corn and oil, a traditional Barbados cocktail that just requires half an ounce of Falernum and 2 ounces of rum. And I'm going to make those right now. I'm going to be using Dorley's XO rum, another Barbados rum, and we'll taste these all against each other now. The rum's still coming through. You still get a little bit of the bitterness that we were getting when we were tasting that on its own. The spice notes are not as strong. The lime comes through a little bit. I think that one's going to be the one that has probably the most lime that comes through. And in a cocktail without any other form of acidity, that might help here. But the rum still comes through, and that's what you want. You want the rum to still be there. You want to still be able to taste all the rum and not get overpowered by everything else. Much more rum forward, having a familiarity there of like a rum old fashioned, because we're not imparting a lot of spice flavors. Now, some recipes you'll find for a corn and oil call to use Angostura. I would probably encourage you to do that if you like Angostura. Not doing it here, not trying to impart any Angostura spice flavors to see how well they do on their own. But sweetness from the Falernum, not much else. Just kind of like rum and some sweetness. The aroma gets some of those spice notes, but what it also is doing is it's tamping down on the aroma from the rum, from the Dorley's rum. So you're getting less rum and like a little bit of spice. In the cocktail, I get more of the anise. There's a little bit of anise in there, as well as the other spices in the clove. That Falernum, what I like about it is it has so much going on in there. If you're like me and you don't really remember exactly how you made it 6 months ago, then you can, it's almost like it evolves, where you can sort of pick up more of those notes in there from the mace, from the anise, from the clove. Still wondering, like, okay, am I going to pick up the almond and the ginger? So there's a lot more complexity. There's a lot more spice to it. It is way more of an intense spice note than the one with John D. Taylor's, which has really no spice at all. So it depends on what you're going for. Is that what you want in any cocktail, or specifically a corn and oil? But it's delicious. Let's move on to the Calfornia Falernum. I mean, I want to give more love to the Bay Area brands. I don't love that one. It's providing something that is much different than the others, and there's something about that I find more interesting, because instead of getting like 3 or 4 or 5 different Falernums that are all the same, having something that can do something. The overall spice flavors don't come through as much, and it more aligns itself with the John D. Taylor's than the homemade versions or the one from Liquid Alchemist. So it's not bad. It's not my favorite, but I think you're going to have to figure out how to put that into a cocktail with those flavors. And that's what's tough, is you're at the store and it's, I don't know, $30 to $40 for something new that you haven't tried. Are you willing to take that risk like I have without really knowing, without being able to try it first? That's what's tough about a lot of these liqueurs that are doing their own thing. And last but not least, the Liquid Alchemist, no alcohol, just the syrup here and our rum. It's missing that much needed lime component that you're getting from Tropical Standard, as well as the Paul Clark version, and that falls flat. But I know in a cocktail with lime juice that the Liquid Alchemist, it's gonna work. It's just in this cocktail, it's just like rum with some spices, and obviously get the sweetness there, but it's not even providing as much of that hint. I guess I'd go back to that John D. Taylor, which I guess there's a hint there of the lime in the cocktail that helps brighten it up, because without it, just spice and rum is just like, and sweetness is kind of you just creating your own spice rum, and that might be interesting to drink on some ice. But the Falernums, the other Falernums with that lime juice or lime oil, lime peel, or adding another missing dimension to this cocktail. So there you go, 5 Falernums, and when I set out on this mission, my goal was to not pick a best one because I think you just can't. They're just so different, and they are so different. There is not one that is going to work in every cocktail over the others, but let's be honest, the best one here is the one from Tropical Standard. It's the most labor intensive, it's the most ingredients. You got to go seek out some of these things. The stuff I use, I'll put in this episode description. Also, if you like these little tasting glasses I used, I just picked them up recently. I found them on Amazon, and as of the time you film this, they're on sale right now. I had seen these before, but I had them in person. Arminder from the Rum Revival did a rum tasting at Last Rites in San Francisco, and that's what they use there at the bar, and I had to have them. So they're kind of cool looking, a little different from the usual Glencairns. So if you have a Falernum, which I'm sure you do, that I missed and didn't cover here, let me know, and what your favorite Falernum is, or your favorite recipe. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, if you want to support this channel, just give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, check out the Patreon, and otherwise, see you on the next one.